Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Hope you are okay. I am sure this news is not all over the news, but I am bringing it here so you all would be very careful because you went to sleep and this man woke up to Antifa. At first, I was like, maybe it's an organization. Everybody also thought the same. So I decided to dive deep to know what Antifa is, only to find out that it's anti fascism. So if you do not agree with all the fascist decision they are making, you are Antifa. And you might be locked up. Something not nice might actually happen. So if you organize protests, you are at risk. If you record eyes, you are at risk. If you or oppose eyes, you are at risk. So at this point in time, you must not show that you are anti-fascism. You must always accept it, no matter how hard it is for you. And I am asking, what kind of regime is this? Because at this point in time, you and I can say that it is an autocratic regime that people fell into. So do not let anybody say black people are not helping them or black people are not doing this. Stay back where you are. Because at this point, everybody have to use wisdom. Let's get into this video.
Here's everything that happened while you were asleep. Trump's executive order that designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization is worded so that anyone celebrating the United Healthcare shooting or protesting ICE agents, filming ICE agents, asking ICE agents for ID, or informing people of their rights may be designated as a terrorist. The drug the Trump administration is touting as a cure for autism is one that the Medicaid and Medicare administrator has a financial stake in. The drug has been fast-tracked for FDA approval. Trump will address the UN General Assembly today. Diddy's lawyers want a time-served sentence. Trump will meet with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries this week about a possible government shutdown. There are two areas of interest that may develop into tropical systems later this week. Monitor local news alerts and make sure your hurricane kit is stocked and ready. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration to restore $500 million in federal grant funding to UCLA. Okay, let me stop. It doesn't look like the rapture happened. I hope those people that sold their houses and cars are going to be okay. And that's everything that happened while you were asleep. Here's everything that happened while you were asleep. Trump's executive order that designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization.
Y'all better be paying attention. This dude has just signed an executive order designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Now, if you look at the wording in the order, it says things like those who participate in organized riots. That sounds like January 6th, huh? People who violently oppose and attack ICE officials, perhaps when they're doing things unlawfully. And then those who engage in coercion and intimidation, doxing political figures. The things he hypes up his people to do, but coercion and intimidation, that's his number one tactic right there. So he's basically saying he's a domestic terrorist and part of Antifa because he's done all those things or put a battery pack in somebody else to do them. But people pay very close attention because anytime he's wording things this way, coercion, intimidation, against political figures, he's basically trying to get to the place where he wants people to not be able to lawfully and legally organize and oppose and march, etc. That's what this is. So dude doesn't do things just for sport, but I think also it may be another way he's trying to tell us that maybe his mother used Tylenol and acetaminophen, remember, he can't pronounce it. Maybe he's trying to tell us that his mother used it and he's autistic. That's the only thing that makes sense, because none of this makes sense. Why would you make an executive order against your damn self? None of this makes sense. It's like the Twilight Zone. What are your
What's up, y'all? Marlon Ladd here. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about what hate does. So when we talk about racism and xenophobia and things like that, hate doesn't just sit idle. Okay, here's a prime example. So I don't know if you know this, but now the administration, Trump has signed an executive order saying that Antifa is a terrorist organization. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Antifa, but they came out years ago. They would go to these like neo-Nazi protests, these KKK protests. And, you know, if those people wanted to get into it with them, they would get into it with them. They'd be like, well, what you want to do? Which shouldn't be a problem. They're defending themselves, right? But because the right can't stand the left and are afraid of the left and love to project, now, you know, just like what happened to Kirk, they were talking about it was a radical left, right? So they have to have a scapegoat and somebody to blame. So who are they blaming? Right now they're blaming Antifa because there's really nobody else. And Antifa is not really together anymore. It's not really organized. They haven't done anything really, but they have to find a scapegoat, right? Now, keep in mind that the KKK, the neo-Nazis, the Proud Boys, any of these people, they have never been on a terrorist watch list. Never. They have actually killed people, right? KKK, neo-Nazis, like white supremacists in this country, white racist in this country, domestic terrorism, right? But Antifa, who ain't did none of that stuff, now they're considered terrorists, which is ridiculous. Now, years ago, in the administration, the Trump administration, they also claimed that the black identity extremist was a terrorist. Probably don't know what that is. What that is they labeled it BIE, and it was basically anybody that was black that they considered radical. Now, that's the kind of stuff that they do. So when they talk about there's no racism in this country and it's not systemic, that's exactly what systemic racism is. And if you don't believe me, look that stuff up. All right, now I got to get out of here and go to work. So until next time, I am Lad Moore. Lad, holla.
Please do not be flippant about Trump designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. It does not matter that this is not legal. It does not matter that there is no organization known as Antifa. They're going to use this to come after people who are organizing and struggling in their communities to fight for a better world, to organize for a better system. This actually makes it more important than ever that you get involved in organizing in your community. We need to swell the ranks of every organization that is fighting war, that is organizing for the working class. Every revolutionary socialist organization. You don't have to join the one I'm in, just join one. Now is not the time for sectarian squabbling or purist politics. We need to cast the widest net and build a broad, united front. Solidarity, comrades.
So it won't be that hard to be deemed a terror now, you guys, in America. All you have to do is disagree with anything the United States administration states, and you'll be deemed as a terrorist. So not only are they coming for those of color, those who are mentally ill, the homeless, children, women, wombs, coming for anyone who decides that they do not agree with anything that Trump's administration says. You're now going to be considered Antifa. You're now going to be considered a terrorist. You know how you have the movies where you have the villain and you have the superhero? Sometimes you have to question the ones they call the villains. Question why the villain is the villain. Question why the villain is so hated. Because the ones who they deem as the villains in America are the ones who are actually speaking out. The same ones who have made problematic. And honestly, this has been going on for a very long time. It never stopped, to be honest. But now it's just so blatantly in everyone's faces. They have came for, the desperate impact liability billing. They came for the revising and repealing government regulations. They came for the Fair Housing Act. They came for the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. They came for habeas corpus, due process. Man, Roe v. Wade. All the rights that women have fought since 1910 are being revised. Every single thing that we all have instilled to make America become a better place, so we thought, It's going down the drain. And if you are fighting for better Medicare, Medicaid, insurance policies, right? You're literally going to be labeled a terrorist. And this is just something that you guys have to all understand. And it's very much fucked up. So whoever is opposed to Trump's administration will now be deemed a terrorist. That's it. That's all I can say. All I can say. Nevertheless, Executive Order 5240 just basically allowing the force of detainment of those who are unhoused individuals under the claim of public safety. So they'll be basically detaining people and locking them up. There is no community reform. There is no reform for anything. There is just, you're now a terrorist. You're now an effect to the public safety. You're now a criminal. You're now this. You're now that. No real results. No real anything. And once Trump is gone and they allow Vance to come into this motherfucking office, y'all.
Hey, it's just after 6:20 Eastern Time on September 25th, and the secret police executive action just dropped. Donald Trump just released a presidential action called Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence, along with an accompanying fact sheet. I just want to say it's a really, really strong start when you have to dedicate a paragraph talking about how your political enemies are anti-fascism. Self-described anti-fascism. These movements portray foundational American principles, e.g. support for law enforcement and border control. He would absolutely include slavery in here if he could. As, quote, fascist. Anyway, tons of concerning stuff in here, as always, but Section 4, this is the secret police section. Attorney General and Secretary of Homeland Security shall designate domestic terrorism as a national priority area and develop appropriate grant programs to allocate funding for law enforcement partners to detect, prevent, and protect against threats arising from this area. I was just thinking that we needed to be giving more money to law enforcement in this moment, President Trump. That ICE budget that is larger than most countries' entire military budget and used to solicit Proud Boys to apply online to disappear their neighbors just isn't cutting it these days. In all seriousness, I think it can be really easy to get overwhelmed by each individual horror that comes out. What you need to understand is that everything that you think is coming. And you can't get distracted by individual ways that that's manifesting. I'm not saying don't pay attention to it. Pay attention to it as much as you can sustain. But the most important thing to be doing right now is to be organizing, to be doing that offline, building community, standing up if you have privilege for your trans neighbors, your migrant neighbors, your Black neighbors. But I think when we're surprised as stuff comes out, it makes us reactive. We're like, oh my gosh, we have to handle this secret police executive order right now, presidential action right now. All the organizing stays the same. You're organizing to plug into your community, to build out your network, to effectively resist, to figure out who you can trust and who you cannot, where you find out about direct action and protest and everything else. All of that has to just stay clear-eyed. It just does. And also you should be buying a little picture of Charlie Kirk so that you can put it up in a shrine in your house, just in case they knock on your door. Be well, plug into community. Things are bad. They already have been.
Donald Trump has formally declared that Antifa is a terrorist organization, a domestic terrorist organization. He signed the executive order last night, and the implications for this country, well, it may be the most impactful move we have seen in 150 years. Trump is challenging those in this country at the highest levels to call him out, to fall in line or otherwise. I believe this is a true test for the United States. And I believe that there's a very real threat of civil war. Now, of course, I'm the guy who talks about it quite a bit, but I will caveat this with, I'm bringing this up only because I have, 7 articles that have been written in the past week or so detailing the either ongoing or soon-to-be civil war, with The Hill stating Charlie Kirk's assassination may be our Fort Sumter. Bit of a bold statement, but there's a reason why I think this is the ultimate test for the United States. Many people are wondering why Donald Trump hasn't gone and arrested, say, Hillary Clinton. Because Trump only has the authority he has through confidence in his position. That is to say, if people fear that his move would be outside of the norms of society, they will defy him. And the moment they do that, the emperor has no clothes. In order for Trump to enact his agenda, there has to be a slow and gradual process by which people get arrested, charges are brought. Once it's become expected and normalized, then Trump can order individuals to make these arrests. To put it simply, if the first thing Trump did when he got in office was tell an FBI agent, go arrest Hillary Clinton, the agent would likely say, no, I quit. Then there would be a public display. The news reporting FBI agents defy Donald Trump, refused to adhere, and the narrative would be, and the confidence would be gone. People would say, don't follow Trump. But what if Trump waits a year? What if there's an assassination? What if he declares Antifa a terrorist organization? They respond with terror. He makes several arrests, and then it becomes normalized. Then, once you have people going out and making the arrests of certain political figures, then he says, here's the DOJ indictment on Hillary Clinton. Then it is just one extra degree for the individual to say, okay, Mr. President, and make that arrest. But I'll break this down, and I'm going to go through all the details that we have because there's a big story here. And I'll explain in detail what I mean by confidence in a system and seriously, like how money works even relates to this. Before we get started, though, my friends, we got some great sponsors. We've got Tax Network USA. Let me pull this one up for you guys. If you're stressed about back taxes, maybe you missed the April deadline, or your books are a mess, don't wait. The IRS is cracking down. Penalties add up fast, 5% per month, up to 25% just for not filing.
So let's briefly talk about the stupid executive order that Trump signed where he declares Antifa to be a domestic terrorist organization. First of all, Antifa is not an organization. This is about as effective as calling tall people a domestic terrorist organization. It is just a group of people around the country with similar beliefs. But also, Antifa just means anti-fascist. So if he's declaring that anybody who holds anti-fascist views around the country is somehow a terrorist, he's openly admitting that he's a fascist. Declaring that anybody who thinks differently than the dear leader is a terrorist is the definition of fascism. But also, once again, despite all the pomp and circumstance, and despite him acting like he's a king from the throne issuing a decree, what legal weight does this hold? Absolutely none. First of all, people forget that his executive orders are not laws. But this entire order is more political than legal. It directed agencies to treat Antifa-linked activity as domestic terrorism where possible. But any sort of prosecutions for crimes would still use existing criminal statutes like rioting, arson, conspiracy, etc. There is no actual legal charge for you are a domestic terrorist because the president said so. But also, domestic groups cannot be designated as terrorist organizations under any U.S. law. There is absolutely no authority to do that. They can do it with foreign terrorist organizations, but there's no legal mechanism for that for domestic groups. And again, Antifa's not an organization. And what's hilarious is despite all of the right-wing violence from the MAGA, like the insurrection, targeting the FBI when Trump was investigated, all of the countless things that we can prove, he used terms like violent left-wing extremists, even though, as I've had to point out several times, that since 2016 when Trump showed up, right-wing violence happens 100 times more often than left-wing violence. And any attempt by them to label someone's free speech or peaceful protesting as terrorism is instantly going to be struck down in the courts. This is once again just an attempt for him to throw red meat to his base and show that everybody in the left and everybody who's a Democrat is somehow a terrorist, while he and his MAGA cultists are actually the ones committing all of the violence. It's just projection once again.
President Donald Trump has labeled Antifa as a terrorist group or organization. I had no clue they were an organization. What is happening? What is going on? Who are the leaders of Antifa, President Trump? Who are the generals? Who are the captains? Let me know how you gain membership. You know what? I'll even give you, okay, Antifa exists. What's their mission? What are they trying to do? Because we know when you name certain Mexican cartels, we know that, they're drug pushers. They may traffic women. They may, they're very extremely violent. They're trying to take over communities. We know that. We know terrorists who are trying to destroy the United States. We know their mission. We know the members. We know their agenda. We know the methods they use. Cool. Antifa, a word that's short for anti-fascist. I didn't know they were accepting membership. I did not know they had leadership. How would one possibly prove someone is a member of Antifa? What does that look like? Even if an individual or a group of people said, hey, I'm Antifa, what is the bearing of proof? Besides them just saying it, it's not a real.
Oh, Lord. Breaking the fuck news. This motherfucker just signed an executive order yesterday. Yeah, y'all beloved Donald Trump. That Antifa is a terrorist organization. Antifa organization. And it's not even a real group. That's what is really getting me. So I'm guessing you can't be against racist people. Now, if you are against the racism, you are a terrorist. Wow.
Three things happened today that may on the surface seem unconnected, but which are actually deeply interrelated. Now, the first, we're going to work backwards into them. The first is that the president issued this memo on countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence, in which he directs federal agencies and law enforcement across the country to prosecute anyone who identifies as anti-fascist, anti-Christian, anti-imperialist, or anti-American, okay? In other words, if you exercise your First Amendment rights in a leftist way, you could very quickly find yourself in federal prison. Number two, we found out that Washington, the Trump administration, is working with the Keir Starmer government in the UK to put former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair in charge of a transitional Gaza authority. This is very blatantly the US and the UK working together to lay the groundwork for what happens after they allow Israel to finish its genocide. This is basically the Balfour Declaration 2.0. This is them picking over the carcass of Gaza for scraps, and I would not be surprised if it is how Trump plans to get his Trump Gaza hotel. And third, I apologize that the headline is cut off a little bit, but Gaza protesters interrupted the first stop of Kamala Harris's book tour. Let's now work from the bottom back up, starting with these protesters at Kamala's book tour. My question being, what was the point here? What is the goal? Of course, Kamala is complicit in genocide as she sat idly by for a year and a half while her boss, former President Genocide Joe Biden, allowed Israel to carry out its most aggressive acts of violence and destruction against the Palestinian people. She should never be allowed to live that down. However, given the other two news articles that I just pointed you toward, where the president is working with the UK to strip Gaza's carcass and designating anyone, like these people, for example, as terrorists, I just wonder why we're not seeing any of this energy at his events. The people who participated in this action may have missed it, but there was a pretty big news story in November where Kamala lost the election. She ran a bad campaign, partially because of her refusal to address Gaza, and she lost the election. She's on a book tour because she lost the election, and when you lose an election, they let you write a book, and they give you a couple $1 million to publish it, and then nobody reads it. She is irrelevant. On the other hand, Donald Trump could end the genocide with a single phone call, just like his predecessor, Genocide Joe, also had the power to do. Now, when Genocide Joe was in power, there were plenty of protesters interrupting his speeches, demonstrating, etc., and so I just want to know why that isn't happening with the current president, and that is a rhetorical question. I will answer it myself. It is because it is actively very, very dangerous to do this to the current president. If you do what those protesters did with Kamala today to Donald Trump, he will have you prosecuted as a domestic terrorist. So from my point of view, it seems like a lot of people would rather safely protest the person with no power, because let's be very clear, if Kamala Harris somehow capitulated to these protests and stood up there on stage and said, yes, you know what, there is a genocide going on, I helped enable it, I bear a lot of responsibility, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life working to fight for Palestinian liberation, it would make no more difference than me saying that here on this app. Because again, she has no power, and because she lost an election, no one's ever going to take advice from her. Moreover, even if they did take advice from her, she can't exactly call up Trump and be like, hey, buddy, remember me? You hate me more than anything else, and you called me a lot of racist slurs. Would you please stop the genocide? That isn't going to happen. But she's the person you can protest against without getting arrested and tried for domestic terrorism. So it seems like a lot of people would rather cosplay their activism, right? Because that's what this is. If you took energy and time to get together a demonstration for Kamala Harris's book tour that nobody cares about or is paying attention to, rather than going to one of the many, many, many rallies and speeches that Trump gives like every single day, there's a reason for that. And it's because you know that you're safe when doing the former and actively in danger when doing the latter. And moreover, I haven't seen this energy even directed at Joe Biden, Genocide Joe himself. Y'all only seem to have this energy for Harris, who never held any actual power over Gaza. Don't tell me she did, because it would just prove that you don't understand what a vice president is or does. Okay? So this has a whiff, just a strong scent of misogynoir, of hate against a black woman specifically. Because y'all could at least do this to Genocide Joe instead if you're too scared to do it to Trump.
I love that some of you realize that Laura Loomer is racist. Welcome to the resistance. You get called Antifa. Let me responsibly rescind that video. I know I look a little crazy. I just woke up. Apparently, on Threads, you can italicize. And then also, this is like some big running joke. That's on me. But this shows how easy it is to fall for shit, because I saw people freaking out about this on TikTok. I saw people freaking out about this on Instagram. I saw people freaking out about it on Twitter. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to just believe them. Let me go check Threads. Now, I don't go on Threads very often. I might go on Threads for 5 minutes every 3 days. But I started scrolling and I see it. I literally see it. Now, I'm not familiar enough with the app to know that you can italicize shit, like just like regularly. I didn't know that. Like Twitter, you can't I'm seeing so many people copy and paste this warning and it looks real. And I'm seeing like anything that is critical of the government has a warning underneath it. And in a time where there's so much issue around free speech and apps censoring things and everything that's going on, I said, that's not too far off. I heard people talking about it. I saw people talking about it. I went and checked my own thing. I said, oh, that's true. And somehow it was still not true. And also this shows that both sides can be fucking idiots. Nigga, nobody goes on Threads like that. We don't get your inside joke. There's serious shit going on right now. This is not a time to spread mass hysteria and be like, hey, we've joking around. No, bro. No. So if you see this thing going around, it is not real. I am now taking down that video in the past. If you see people on Threads saying, oh, Antifa, it's not a real thing. My bad. That's on me.
This is all I got from this video. And sincerely speaking, this government is is on a very long thing. Sincerely speaking, I am not going to lie. This government is on a long thing. So Antifa, anti-fascism, right? Anyone who isn't a fascist is a terrorist. So now, if you organize a protest, you are anti-fascist. Anti-fascist, I don't know. I don't even know how to. You are. Hey, how am I supposed to say this? If you organize a protest, you are anti-fascism. So you will be apprehended. If you go for some kind of rally that is talking about them, you will be held responsible. And I am asking, are people not seeing all these policies or the thing? I don't know. This man has the kind of policy he has signed this year, just this in 9 months. Heaven knows. On a very serious note, MAGA is a domestic terrorist organization, if you know what I am saying, because I have never this is my first time in my life that I am seeing a government sign Antifa. Like, if you are not a fascist, if you are not practicing fascism, you are a terrorist. So you must join the club. You must join the cult to be part of them. So if you oppose, you are probably going somewhere. And now you remember that I talked about how Kamala Harris, like some people came to her book tour to disrupt her this thing. You know, I told you people, why did they not go to Washington, D.C. to protest? Because if they had gone out to do Pe0ple, they will arrest them. They are anti-fascists. Hi. You know, it sounds like an organization. And the fact is that this news is actually not out there. A lot of people do not know it. It is not an organization. It is anti-fascism. Anti-fascism. So if you oppose the government, if you say anything that the government doesn't like and they see you, they say it, that is it for you. I am scared, man. And that is why I decided to bring this here. Because all these important informations that people do, they do not even put all this. I am sure that it is not even being televised or something. Because they won't talk about it. They want people to fall victims, you know, so that they will use somebody to set as an example. And also, if you record eyes, that is another one. If you record eyes, if you oppose eyes, decision, if you fight back and all that, Antifa. So if you wake up and protest against this government, against MAGA, against the ill that is happening with this government, Antifa, this country has cooked. America is cooked. The government also is cooked. Because I have never seen, it's only a moron that will make this kind of policy. It's only someone that does not want the good of the government or the country as a whole that will make this kind of. They do not want to hear from you. They don't want you to speak what you. They don't want to hear from you at all. So you have nothing to say. Wow. So my people, this is actually me bringing this here because if you are not Antifa, you might actually, in fact, if you're not Antifa, you have to just keep it to yourself. Because if you show that you are not, I mean, the name even sounds somehow, it's even hard for me to even talk. So if you are not Antifa, you are in problem, and you must not show that you are not Antifa. You must not show by going for protest, by recording eyes, by opposing some certain decisions. If you don't agree, it's okay. Just say within your heart that it's okay. No matter what it is, it's okay. I will draw the curtain here. Bye for now.